Rain hit hard against the windows of the big Mensa mansion. Inside the master bedroom, Esther lay in bed, watching her husband David get ready to go out. Again. The clock showed 8 p.m., and her heart sank knowing he was leaving her alone. Again. She lay against the silk pillows, her fingers gripping the soft lavender bedsheets. The colour had once symbolized romance, a reminder of their honeymoon in Paris, when love had been enough. But now, as she stared at David, she realized love had long since left this house. Across the room, David stood before the mirror, adjusting his collar with slow, deliberate movements. He smoothed non-existent wrinkles from his designer suit, the same one she had gifted him on their last anniversary. His reflection stared back at him, indifferent, as though the woman in the bed behind him was nothing more than a shadow in his life. Esther watched him, her heart aching with something far worse than sickness. He had already left her in every way that mattered, yet still she reached for him. "David," she called softly, "please don't go out tonight. The doctor says I don't have much time left, and I want to spend the little time I have with you." He didn't turn around, just kept fixing his tie in the mirror. "I told you I'm meeting the boys for drinks." "The boys?" Esther's voice cracked. "Like last Thursday? And Tuesday before that?" "Don't start, Esther." He sighed, checking his phone. "I need this. Running the company is stressful. I need you too." She pushed herself up against the pillows. "Remember when we used to spend evenings together? You'd read to me or we'd watch old movies. That was before I got sick." She finished for him. "Before I became a burden." David finally turned to face her. "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." Esther reached out her hand to him. "Please, just tonight. Stay with me. We could order food, talk like we used to." "I can't cancel now. The boys are expecting me." "The boys?" Tears filled her eyes. "Or someone else." His face hardened. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Your new cologne," she said quietly. "It's nice. Did she pick it out for you?" "You're being ridiculous." He grabbed his jacket. "The illness is making you imagine things." "I'm sick, David. Not stupid." Her voice grew stronger. "Remember our wedding vows? In sickness and in health?" Of course I remember. But he wouldn't meet her eyes. "Then prove it. Stay home tonight, just one night." "I can't." "Can't or won't?" David moved toward the door. "I'll be back late. Don't wait up." "I remember when you couldn't wait to come home to me," Esther said softly. "What changed?" He paused at the door, his hand on the handle. For a moment she thought he might turn back, might choose her. But then his phone buzzed, and she saw him smile at the screen. "Get some rest," he said, and walked out. The door clicked shut. Esther stared at it, tears running down her face. On her nightstand, a framed photo from their wedding day mocked her, David's arms wrapped around her waist, both of them laughing under fairy lights in her father's garden. Her white dress had sparkled, his eyes had shone with love, or what she'd thought was love. She remembered how he'd whispered, "Forever, my love, in sickness and in health." She turned the frame face down, unable to bear the sight of yesterday's happiness. The movement knocked over a small bottle of pills, ones she hadn't taken tonight. She watched them scatter across the polished wood, tiny white dots against dark mahogany. Her tears stopped suddenly. Wiping her eyes, she opened her drawer and pulled out a letter. If David wouldn't choose her, she would make sure he regretted it. Outside, thunder crashed as David's car started up. The storm raged on, but inside Esther Mensa, a different kind of storm was brewing, one that would soon wash away everything David held dear. That night, Esther couldn't sleep. As David's side of the bed remained empty, she wandered into her father's office. The room still smelled of his pipe tobacco, untouched since his sudden death 3 years ago. Unable to sleep and tired of listening for David's car, she decided to finally sort through her father's papers. The old desk lamp cast a warm glow as she opened drawers, finding business documents and family photos. But it was a hidden compartment in the bottom drawer that caught her attention. Inside, she found a worn leather box she'd never seen before. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside lay letters, old photographs, and a diary. One photo made her gasp. It showed Helen, their former maid, standing in the mansion's garden. She was young, beautiful, and unmistakably pregnant. Esther remembered Helen well. They had spent countless nights stargazing together on the mansion's roof, sharing dreams and secrets. The date on the photo's back made Esther's heart race. It was taken years ago, during the time her late brother visited from abroad, just months before his fatal accident. Her father's handwriting beneath read, "My grandson will need watching over." With shaking hands, Esther began reading the letters. They told a story that brought tears to her eyes. Helen had run away when she discovered she was pregnant, fearing she would lose her job or worse. She left only a brief note. "I'm sorry, I must go." The diary entries revealed how her father had secretly searched for Helen, finally locating her at Hope Children's Home. But by then, tragedy had struck. Helen had died in childbirth, leaving behind a baby boy named Nathaniel. More letters showed how her father had arranged a trust fund for the child, planning to visit him to tell him about his heritage, but death had claimed him before he could fulfill that promise or tell Esther about the boy. "Oh, Papa," Esther whispered, wiping her tears. "You were trying to make things right." The next morning, ignoring her doctor's orders to rest, Esther drove to Hope Children's Home. Her heart pounded as she walked through its worn corridors. In a quiet corner she saw him, a 7-year-old boy drawing stars just as his mother once loved to do. He had Helen's gentle eyes and her brother's quiet smile. In that moment, Esther knew she would finish what her father started. She would protect this child, her nephew. "Hello," she said softly. "I'm Esther." That first meeting began a new chapter. Every Wednesday at 2 o'clock, her silver Mercedes would pull into the orphanage driveway. She brought books, sweets, and stories about stars, carrying on Helen's legacy of love for the night sky. David never asked where she went these afternoons. He was too busy with Anita to notice his wife's renewed purpose. But Esther didn't mind. She had found something more precious than her husband's fading love. She had found hope in a little boy who drew stars just like his mother before him. Sunlight streamed through the dusty windows of Hope Children's Home, warming the worn wooden floor. In a quiet corner, 7-year-old Nathaniel sat cross-legged, carefully drawing stars with his blue crayon. While other children played noisily in the yard, he stayed inside, just as he did every Wednesday, waiting. At exactly 2 o'clock, the familiar sound of tires on gravel made him look up. His heart jumped. Esther's silver Mercedes was gliding through the gates. Dropping his crayon, he pressed his face against the window, leaving smudges on the glass. "She's here," he called out, racing to the entrance despite Matron Grace's warnings to slow down. Esther stepped out of her car, elegant even in illness. Today's blue silk headscarf matched her eyes, and her arms cradled the usual Wednesday treasures, books, sweets, and something new, a telescope. "My star boy," she said, kneeling despite her weakness to receive his eager hug. Her arms wrapped around him, and for a moment they both held on as if trying to keep each other from floating away. Meanwhile, across town at the Golden Spoon restaurant, David Mensah and his lover Anita played their own game of deception. They sat at their usual corner table, where the owner, well paid for his silence, ensured their privacy. "How much longer?" Anita asked, stirring her expensive cocktail. Her red nails matched her lipstick, the same shade that often marked David's collars. "The doctors say weeks, maybe months." David smiled. discussing his wife's illness as casually as the weather forecast. Then everything becomes ours. The mansion, the company, all of my father-in-law's empire. What David didn't know was that Anita had her own plans. While he talked about their future, her phone buzzed with messages from James, a wealthy oil executive who thought he was her only lover. In her other phone, hidden in her designer purse, texts from Michael, another rich businessman, waited for replies. "We'll sell everything," David continued, pouring more champagne. "Start fresh, just you and me." "Of course, darling," Anita purred, already calculating which man would offer the better deal. David had the Mensa fortune, yes, but James had oil money, and Michael owned half of Accra's real estate. Back at the orphanage, Nathaniel examined his new telescope while Esther showed him how to focus it. "Tonight you'll see real stars," she promised. "Why do you love stars so much, Auntie Esther?" he asked innocently. She smiled, remembering nights when Helen would join her on the mansion's roof, both of them stargazing and sharing secrets. "Your mother loved them too," she said softly, then quickly added, "All mothers must love stars." Matron Grace brought them tea, fretting over Esther's health. But here, with her brother's son, though Nathaniel didn't know that yet, Esther felt stronger than ever. The afternoon sun began to set, casting long shadows across the orphanage grounds. Esther hugged Nathaniel goodbye, fighting tears as she whispered, "The stars will always guide you home." Soon he would know everything. About Helen, about his father, about his true place in the Mensa family. But for now, this moment was enough. Back at the Golden Spoon, David and Anita's lunch stretched into afternoon drinks. "Once Esther's gone," he said, "we'll get rid of that old housekeeper too. Mami Ama knows too much." Anita nodded, though she had already copied Mami Ama's number from David's phone. Always good to have backup plans. "Where does Esther go every Wednesday?" Anita asked casually, fishing for information. "Some charity work?" David waved dismissively. "She's always been soft-hearted. Waste of time, if you ask me." Neither of them knew about the boy drawing stars in an orphanage. Neither suspected that Esther had found her father's hidden letters, or that she had already changed her will. They were too busy plotting their future with money that would never be theirs. "I should head back," David said finally, checking his watch. "Esther will be home soon." "Of course," Anita smiled, already composing a text to James about dinner tomorrow. "We wouldn't want her getting suspicious." They kissed goodbye in the parking lot, unaware that one of Mami Ama's friends was photographing them from across the street. Another piece of evidence for the growing file. That evening, while David told Esther about his business lunch, Anita met with her lawyer, discussing how to maximize her gains from multiple relationships. "Men are so predictable," she told her lawyer. "They all think they're the only one." But Anita had miscalculated. She thought she was the clever one, playing multiple wealthy men. She didn't know that she was just another pawn in a larger game, one where Esther and a 7-year-old boy who loved stars would soon change everything. The Mensa mansion held secrets in every corner. Mami Ama knew them all. 23 years as housekeeper had taught her that walls did more than whisper. They kept receipts. In the soft glow of her quarters, her weathered hands trembled as she arranged photographs on her small bed. Click, click, click. Her phone had captured it all. David entering the Golden Spoon on supposed business nights. David and Anita embracing in the parking lot of Hotel Peninsula. Receipt after receipt for jewelry Esther never received. "Lord have mercy," she muttered, sliding each piece of evidence into a manila envelope. Her rosary beads clinked softly against her chest as she worked. The kitchen clock struck midnight. Footsteps echoed from above. Esther would be awake, unable to sleep again. Mami Ama's heart ached, remembering the vibrant woman who once danced through these halls. A car's headlights swept across her window. David's BMW purred into the driveway. Mame Ama moved silently to her door, cracking it open just enough. Her nose caught the now familiar scent of Anita's signature perfume as David stumbled past. "Sir?" she called out softly, playing her part. "Shall I bring you some water?" David waved her off, his collar askew, a smudge of red lipstick visible even in the dim light. "Not tonight, Mummy." In her pocket, her phone held fresh evidence. Another photo of him arriving home past midnight, dishevelled and reeking of betrayal. Upstairs, Esther's cough echoed through the halls. Mame Ama climbed the stairs, carrying chamomile tea on a silver tray, the same tray she'd used at Esther's wedding reception. "Can't sleep, madam?" she asked, setting down the tea. Esther sat propped against pillows, papers scattered across her bed. Legal documents, bank statements, property deeds. Her reading glasses perched on her nose, determination burning through her physical weakness. "Has he come home?" Esther asked, though they both knew the answer. "Yes, madam, just now." They shared a look, heavy with unspoken understanding. Mame Ama noticed an open letter from Mr. Boateng, Esther's godfather, peeking from beneath the papers. Days blurred into weeks. Mame Ama watched, documented, and waited. She saw the parade of lawyers visiting Esther's room, speaking in hushed tones. She noticed how David spent less and less time at home, his excuses growing thinner. One evening, while cleaning David's study, she found a text message preview on his carelessly unlocked computer. "After she's gone, we'll sell everything. Start fresh. Just you and me, baby." Her hands shook as she took a screenshot, adding it to her growing collection. The mansion's atmosphere grew heavier with each passing day. Even the other staff felt it. The gardener, the cook, the drivers. They all saw. They all knew. During her evening prayers, Mame Ama added a new petition. Not for Esther's healing anymore, but for justice. She remembered the day Esther's father had hired her, saying, "Take care of my little girl." Now, decades later, she was doing just that, in a way the old man never could have imagined. One night she heard soft crying from Esther's room. Entering quietly, she found her employer holding an old photograph of Helen, her former maid. "Mammy," Esther whispered, "do you remember her?" "Yes, madam, and her son." "Nathaniel," they said together. Mame Ama sat on the edge of the bed, protocol forgotten in this intimate moment. "Everything is ready," she said softly, patting the envelope hidden in her apron pocket. "Mr. Boateng has all the evidence." Esther reached for her hand, squeezing it weakly. "Thank you, my friend, for seeing everything, for keeping track." Outside, a car door slammed. David's voice floated up, laughing into his phone. Another late night. Mame Ama stood, straightening her apron. She had more photos to take, more evidence to gather. The envelope in her room grew thicker each day, waiting for the moment when truth would finally break its silence. "Sleep well, madam," she said, turning off the lights. In the darkness, Esther's voice followed her. "Justice comes to those who wait, doesn't it, Mammy?" "Yes, madam," she replied, closing the door softly. "Yes, it does." The morning Esther died, rain tapped softly against the windows, just as it had the night she begged David to stay. Her room smelled of medicine and white lilies, flowers she'd always loved, but David had stopped bringing years ago. The doctor arrived first, his face grave as he checked her pulse one last time. Time of death, 6:47 a.m. David wasn't there. He'd spent the night at a business meeting. Mame Ama sat beside the bed, clutching Esther's still warm hand, tears streaming down her weathered face. "Go in peace, my dear madam," she whispered in her native tongue. Mr. Boateng arrived within the hour, his usual dignified composure cracking as he looked at his goddaughter's peaceful face. "Call the lawyers," he instructed, his voice thick. Everything must proceed as she planned. The news spread quickly. By afternoon, the mansion filled with mourners, real ones who'd loved Esther, and others who came to maintain appearances. David rushed in at noon, his tie askew, wearing yesterday's suit. He played the part of a grieving husband well, too well. His performance would have won awards if anyone had been fooled. "My darling," he wailed, dropping to his knees beside her bed. "What will I do without you?" Behind him, Mame Ama exchanged glances with Mr. Boateng. They both saw Anita's text message flash on David's phone. "Is it done?" The funeral took place 3 days later. The church overflowed with flowers and people. David stood at the front, head bowed, a black handkerchief pressed to his dry eyes. In the back corner, partially hidden behind a pillar, Anita waited, her red lipstick inappropriate for the occasion. Nathaniel sat in the front row, holding Mr. Boateng's hand, his small shoulders shaking with real grief. He'd brought his telescope, Esther's last gift, refusing to leave it at the orphanage. After the service, as rain continued to fall, they gathered in the Mensa Mansion's grand library for the reading of the will. Dark wood panels absorbed the tension in the room. David sat confidently in his leather chair, already mentally spending his inheritance. The family lawyer, Mr. Owusu, adjusted his glasses. His expression gave nothing away as he broke the seal on the envelope. "Being of sound mind," he began. David leaned forward, smile ready. "I, Esther Mensah, hereby bequeath." The room held its breath. "All my property, assets and holdings." David's smile widened. "To Nathaniel Mensah, my legally adopted son." The smile froze, then cracked. "What?" Mr. Owusu continued, his voice steady. "With Mr. Boateng acting as trustee until Nathaniel reaches age 21. "This is impossible," David shouted, slamming his fist on the mahogany table. "I'm her husband. This is ridiculous." "There's more," Mr. Owusu said calmly, pulling out another envelope. "Evidence of your extramarital affairs, financial misconduct and—" He paused, looking directly at David. "Attempts to hasten Mrs. Mensah's death by tampering with her medication." The colour drained from David's face. Behind him, Anita slipped quietly toward the door. Mame Ama stepped forward, placing her own envelope on the table. "The original photos, sir," she said quietly. Years of witnessed moments, documented betrayals, all laid bare. "You can't do this," David whispered, his confidence evaporating. "You can't!" Mr. Boateng stood, Nathaniel's small hand in his. "It's already done. Security will escort you out." 2 men in dark suits appeared at David's elbows. "The cars are no longer yours," Mr. Owusu continued. "The house, the company shares, the accounts, all transferred. Legal and binding." As David was led out, thunder rolled overhead. Through the library windows, they watched him standing in the rain, staring up at the mansion that was no longer his. Nathaniel moved to the window, his telescope clutched to his chest. "Will the stars come out tonight?" he asked Mr. Boateng. "Yes, my boy," the old man answered, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Your mother made sure you'll always have a place to see them." The rain continued to fall, washing away the old and making way for the new. The evening after the will reading, David stood outside the Mensa mansion, the place that had once been his kingdom. His fingers trembled as he tried his key, but it no longer fit. The security guard, the same man who had greeted him every morning for 5 years, now stood stone-faced, looking through him as if he were nothing more than a stranger. "Your access has been revoked, sir," the guard said. "Please leave before we're forced to call the authorities." David stared at him, disbelief tightening his chest. The rain fell steadily, soaking through his once expensive suit, now the only thing of value he had left. Water dripped from his hair, his collar, his ruined leather shoes. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Anita. He let it ring. She had vanished the moment the will was read, slipping away like a shadow, taking with her the dreams they had built together, or rather, the illusions he had believed in. Through the iron gates, David watched as workers removed his name from the family crest, chiseling away the last evidence of his place in this house. In the circular driveway, his luxury cars, the Bentley, the Mercedes, the BMW, were being driven away one by one. Days turned into weeks. The business papers reported David's downfall with barely concealed glee. Mensa Holdings undergoes dramatic leadership change. David Mensa, from mansion to motel. Society scandal, the fall of a fortune hunter. Anita's betrayal proved spectacular. She sold their love story to the tabloids, complete with intimate details and private messages. The final blow came when photos emerged of her with James, the wealthy businessman who'd been her backup plan all along. David had been a pawn in her game, just as he had tried to make Esther one in his. 1 month after everything changed, David stood outside the Mensa Holdings building, staring up at the new sign above the doors. Nathaniel Mensa Foundation. Through the glass entrance, he could see the boy himself, walking beside Mr. Boateng, touring what had once been David's empire. The foundation's first project was expanding the Hope Children's Home. More buildings, better facilities, scholarships for the children. Esther's legacy growing stronger while David's faded away. And sometimes, if you passed by the Mensa building late at night, you might see a figure standing in the shadows, a man in a weathered suit, watching the life he lost but never deserved. In those moments, the night watchman would pretend not to notice David's presence, or the tears that finally came, too late to matter. Justice, like the stars themselves, had finally found its proper alignment. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more great content. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so drop a comment below and let me know what you think. And don't forget to share this video with someone who might enjoy it too. See you in the next one.